The National Council of Teachers of Mathematics welcomes you to Adding It All Up, a podcast created by and for mathematics educators and teachers. Join us each month as we explore current topics, insights, and emerging trends with thought leaders in the math community. And now, the hosts of Adding It All Up, NCTM President LaTrenda Knighton and NCTM President-elect Dewey Gottlieb.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Adding It All Up, and Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us for our first podcast of 2026. It's 2026, y'all. Can you believe it? I can't believe we're saying that number. To help galvanize us for the start of the new year, today we're diving into a topic that's at the heart of every effective classroom: belonging. This episode connects to a recent issue of our MTLT journal, Mathematics Teacher, Learning and Teaching, PK-12, which focused on and celebrated mathematical belonging. The issue highlighted strategies and tools teachers can use to help students feel like they truly belong in the mathematics classroom, feeling that they're part of a learning community where their ideas matter, and how that manifests in a more positive relationship with mathematics. And I love that focus because belonging isn't just about students fitting in. It's about students feeling valued for who they are as mathematical thinkers and the experiences that they bring with them to the classroom. So we're excited to continue that conversation today.
Thanks, Dewey. And that sense of belonging can look really different in a math classroom compared to other subjects. We all know as mathematics educators that math has a reputation of sort. We see it as a source of joy and curiosity. But there are others where math is a place where they felt excluded and they've been told that they're not math people. And I know I've had moments where I've experienced this with some of the teachers and students that I've supported during my career. One example I can think of is one year when I was working as a math coach. I actually had a teacher who had always told me she was not a math person. And so prior to that school year, she taught literacy only. Once there were not enough students for them to have classes that were departmentalized and she had to teach math, she convinced every child in her classroom that not only was she not a math person, that they weren't math people either. And so during that time, I had to be very creative and think of ways to come to that classroom to bring things and bring activities to those students to have them see that math was not a barrier for them and that there was love, there was joy, there was curiosity that they could experience in math class. And it became really funny because I would use the students as my vehicle to change that mindset. And I actually saw her get excited when she saw them get excited. And she really figured out, oh, I can do this. And she kind of giggled and admitted to herself that she never thought that I would wear her down and convince her that there was a place for her in mathematics. And so that was probably one of my biggest challenges as a teacher leader.
Yeah, I think a lot of teachers have similar experiences, LaTrenda. So thanks for sharing that. Even thinking of myself as a teacher, not as a learner, I can see myself as when mathematics got to a point where, hey, I hit a wall. When I was in high school, I was really successful with math and I liked math. And then I got to one particular class and I was like, I just don't get it. And then when students feel that way, they check out of mathematics. They think, I'm not a math person. I'm not smart, whatever that means. And when students see that mathematics can be more than just getting right answers, that their thinking is valued, that there's more than one way to approach a problem, to think about a problem, that they can use their own intuition as an entry point into engaging with mathematics, it changes their relationship with the subject.
You made a really important point, Dewey, because you're talking about not just doing the math and looking at it as just numbers. And you're talking about belonging, not so much about, what are our expectations for students? Because when we think about belonging, it doesn't mean that we're lowering our expectations, but we're actually expanding the view that we have of mathematics. So we're seeing it in its total, but most importantly, those type of things expand access. So it really helps students. It helps our fellow educators see that math is accessible to them. And it really helps students see their voices, their strategies, and their way of thinking and their reasoning as how they fit and how they belong in mathematics. And they really begin to see themselves as learners and doers of mathematics. And that's very much connected to what we'll talk about today. Today, we're joined by Salandra Grice-Johnson, who works with future teachers, and one of her pre-service teachers, Alexis Lien. They'll share their perspectives on what belonging looks like in math classrooms from both the teacher and student's point of view. Salandra, can you start us off by introducing yourself to our listeners?
Yes, thank you, Latrinda. So my name is Dr. Salandra Grice-Johnson, and I am a assistant professor of education at Sam Houston State University. I work with pre-service teachers and getting them prepared to walk into any classroom and be prepared to successfully and effectively teach any student. And so I'm super excited to be here and engage in this conversation with you guys.
And Alexis, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Alexis Lien. I'm a current junior at Sam Houston State University in the education program, and I am specifically looking for an EC through 6 certification right now. So I'm excited to go into any of the leading classrooms and share my perspective and what I've learned.
It's great to have you both here. Thank you.
Thanks, Salandra and Alexis, for being with us today. I'm going to pose this first question to both of you. I'd like you to reflect and kind of share your thoughts about what does belonging in the classroom mean to you, and why is it especially important for students while learning mathematics?
I'll let Alexis go first.
The belonging in the classroom for me has definitely changed over time since I've started student teaching and been in the program. It's definitely taken on you don't fit into a mold, you are the mold. You have to meet the kids where they are and kind of change how you do things. And so I've learned that making a kid feel like they belong, making myself feel like I belong, especially in a mathematics classroom, was a lot about just starting where I am and admitting this is where we are and it's okay.
I just want to very quickly follow up with something Alexis said. I absolutely love, Alexis, that you started off by saying where I am now is not where I was when I started. And I think that's such an important message for teachers and parents and all educators just to kind of think about. I can think about that in my own journey. When I was a pre-service teacher like you, Alexis, or when I started my teaching career, the beliefs I had at that time were definitely not the beliefs that persisted. And at some point I had to come to believe that like, hey, maybe the way I thought I should be doing things, it wasn't it. So I love that you're starting your career at that point. It took me a few years to get there.
Along the same lines of both you and Alexis, but being at where I am in this kind of 30,000 feet level of going through all these different stages of education and seeing how it looks with students, with pre-service teachers, with professors, with teachers in the classroom, I think that belonging is something that should be at the heart of all teaching, and especially in that math classroom, because like Latrinda was saying, all those students coming in there thinking that they're not math people, and I was one of them, right? I can't do this. I'm not smart enough if I don't get the right answer. And so having that deep understanding of what belonging actually means, right? Not just fitting in, I think is one of those fundamental skills that not only need to be taught to educators, but really they need to kind of embody as part of their philosophy so that it can exude in their classrooms.
Thank you so much for your insight, ladies. So thinking back to your own experiences as students, can you describe a moment when you felt like you truly belonged or didn't belong in a math classroom? And how have those experiences shaped how you think about belonging today?
So I'll say this. I was one of those students who, once I got to middle school, I hated math. I did not feel like I belonged. I felt like I wasn't good at it. And then after going through middle school, high school, and undergrad, what I did find was that I was only, unfortunately, successful with teachers that I thought liked me. If I felt like the teacher was mean to me or didn't take time to answer questions, or I didn't feel like they were helpful, it was a struggle, or I actually failed and had to take pre-algebra in my freshman year because I struggled so much with professors and teachers that weren't very helpful. So for me, my personal experiences and feeling that math anxiety, even to this day as an adult, but now I know I actually can do math. I just need it to be done the way I need and think about it the way I need to think about it. But I think it's so important for us to reflect on our own experiences, especially when we're educators, so that we can relate to students who we may feel like are not grasping content or are not engaged, and remember, oh, wait a minute, let me make sure all these bases are covered and that they actually feel comfortable in this classroom. And I have built that relationship with them and they feel belonging so that we can get over this hurdle and get to the learning part.
It sounds as if those educators who liked you really made you feel as if you belong in that space. So that's a perfect example of why that's important.
For me, I've had a similar experience. I just did not think I fit in a math classroom. My mom always said she was not math oriented. I then carried her belief with me that I couldn't do it. And then around high school, about sixth grade, I had a teacher. I took pre-algebra really young, and she made the time to see me. I would be like, I can't do this. And she'd be like, yes, you can. Go try it again. Give me tools, flipped it around. And then I got to college and I had a couple stops along the way of, okay, I can't do this again. I had professors that weren't accommodating. They just thought we should have it together. And actually, I have a professor right now that Salandra knows has made math my thing. I am actually looking to teach math now when I get my certification, because it matters. If you can meet a kid where they are and show them that they can do this, they'll change. They'll love it.
Connect with thousands of math education professionals at an upcoming NCTM Spring Conference. Join us February 11th to 13th in Indianapolis or March 16th to 18th in New Orleans and gain practical strategies and effective tools you can use immediately in your classroom. Learn more at nctm.org/springconference today.
Salandra, thinking about your role as a teacher educator in preparing pre-service teachers, we hear the word belonging and it might sound like a trivial idea, but it's really not. And when teachers try to implement strategies in their classroom to really help students feel that sense of belonging, it can take teachers out of their comfort zone. And I'm talking about my own personal experience. So would you share with us, how do you prepare pre-service teachers to recognize and nurture belonging in their mathematics classrooms?
So one of the foundational things is creating that sense of cultural responsiveness in them and their ability to be culturally relevant educators. And you're right, this is one of the things that takes teachers out of their comfort zone. And I'm known for doing that in my courses. But at the end, after pushing through that discomfort and them having that practice of growing through their cultural competence, that critical consciousness, and then even understanding how all of that is at the heart of student success, they start to see the connections and how culturally relevant, responsive, and sustaining teaching is, they're not just buzzwords, they're not just fluff. It's really foundational to all of our essential learning that we want to teach students. We have to get through culture and understand culture, right, and identity before we can get to all of that content. So I start every course ensuring that they have a firm foundation in culturally responsive pedagogies. The next part of that is, of course, being that model for them and making sure that they can see through my teaching what that actually looks like. Because we know true culturally responsive teaching is not just steps and checklists. It really is a disposition and a mindset, and guiding them and developing that. I say, I'm going to show you what this actually looks like. So I kind of play multiple roles with them in that modeling. And then always making sure that I'm showing them how not just knowing your content is not only just a good thing, but then how do we connect that to what students already know, to what their background is, to what interests them? Are you showing them role models in the math classroom that they can emulate? Do they see more than just Newton and Franklin, right? Do they actually see a wide representation of what mathematics looks like? And I take them even further, and some of them, their minds are blown when I say, we can't just start with Europe. Like, we need to go back to Asia, back to Africa. Those mathematical concepts are not just central in European cultures. And so when they get that wide view and they start to see not only is it historically relevant, contemporary, rarely relevant, but also relevant in their daily lives, then they start to be able to make those concepts relevant for their littles. And so the basis of that is just that culturally responsive teaching If you have that down, you're absolutely going to be able to embody a community and an environment of belonging for all of your learners, especially those marginalized learners like our emergent bilinguals, our students of color, and our students with disabilities.
I love all of the examples that you gave of ways to do this, because while you were talking about pre-service teachers, I know some of our listeners are practicing teachers and they're listening to this. And so these are great ideas to help them to really embrace this idea and incorporate these concepts in their classroom. So based on your experience and your research, what are some common misconceptions that teachers or teacher educators have about belonging in the math classroom? And how can teachers avoid those? And even those people who support teachers, like the coaches and instructional leaders.
I love this question because it's very common. There's a few misconceptions, but I'll start with one, and that's that a sense of belonging doesn't matter, right? It's just fluff. When I'm not here to make students feel good about themselves, I'm just here to teach math. And so that's a huge misconception. And like anybody, we never want to be in spaces where we don't feel welcome, where we don't feel included, where we don't feel valued. Students feel the same way. They don't want to take intellectual risks like mathematical thinking and processing if they don't feel like they belong. And so it is more than just making students feel good about students. It is actually preparing them for learning. Another misconception that I see is that when teachers, maybe who are still developing their sense of portraying belonging in the classroom, sense a lack of motivation or engagement or interest, even lack of understanding, or our favorite misbehaviors in students in the math class, they automatically think that, oh, well, the student doesn't care, their parents don't care, they're unmotivated, or they lack intelligence or ability. And then they lower their expectations. And we know it's downhill from there once teachers lower their expectations. And so I want teachers, especially pre-service teachers who are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, right? and ready to go into the classroom, to know that sense of belonging really does come from students knowing that their thinking matters in the classroom and that everything is not just about right answers and wrong answers. But when we kind of embrace making mistakes, allowing them to learn content in different ways, and allowing them to show what they know in multiple ways, that lack of motivation and what seems like misunderstanding or seems like lack of ability dwindles down and is reduced dramatically.
That is such a good tip for teachers who say, oh, I heard about this and I tried it once and it didn't work, to realize they have to have the perseverance to stick with it and to notice those behaviors that don't trigger disinterest, but behaviors that actually show that students are putting up their defense mechanisms that they've learned to have. So I love those strategies you've given us for helping people to combat those common misconceptions.
I'd like to ask you to think about your experiences, not only as a future teacher, as a pre-service teacher right now, but even your prior experiences as a learner of mathematics. When you reflect on that, or your experience, how does your own journey help you empathize with students who struggle with belonging? And how does that kind of manifest in how you want your students to feel in math class?
So looking back, not in where I am now, it definitely makes me realize that I needed help. I needed help and I wasn't okay with asking for it. I would show signs that I needed help and then wouldn't do anything for them. Teacher's desk was open, study groups were open, things were open. I didn't want to branch out. I was known as one of my smarter classmates, which in belonging, that shouldn't be said either, I've learned, but they always spoke highly of me. They used me as a pointer in class. So the second that I felt like I wasn't excelling, I didn't want help. Looking forward with that, it helps me empathize with my kids in the fact that they know that they need help. They know that they are good at math if I make them feel like they belong. And so I really just need to focus on building the relationship. Like Salandra was saying, a lot of people are like, I'm just here to teach. This is just my job. I don't need them to like me. I do need them to like me. I do want to like them. I did not want to be in a classroom like where my teacher didn't care for me. I was frustrating to them, whatever it may have been. And so for me, it's definitely changed how I view the classroom dynamic. The idea of having small groups, making them not feel so pressured. My teachers also, when they made a mistake on the board, would not own that. They'd be like, well, maybe you guys told me wrong. Instead, very much taking accountability. Hey, I got that wrong. Let's try that again. It really opens the door for them. And I think it's changed the way I viewed who teachers are supposed to be instead of just authorities that never make a mistake and they're perfect. We're all human and we all had to learn at some point.
I love that. Helping students to see that not only their teachers, but the subject of mathematics, there's a human element to it. That's really important, a component of this sense of belonging. And when we do these strategies that you and Salandra have been talking about, or at least approach teaching with that perspective, it decenters the content and just tries to shift that centering onto students, right? Which is what we're all about, right? Of course, we want students to be successful and achieve great things with mathematics and love the subject, but it's equally about the kids themselves as it is about the mathematics that they're learning. So I absolutely love that you're starting out your career with that perspective, because I know I didn't have that when I first started in my teaching career.
Salandra and Alexis, it has been wonderful listening to you today. It has been just a breath of fresh air. So I want you to think about teachers, not just new teachers. Think about teachers who are experienced as well, because there are a lot of teachers, as you both have pointed out, who still struggle with actually, one, accepting that belonging is important. Two, actually knowing how to nurture and build those relationships. And then some who struggle with that perseverance to keep it up. So if you had one piece of advice that you could give to teachers about fostering mathematical belonging, what would it be?
So the one piece of advice that I would give that I think covers a lot would be that relationships matter and representation matters. And of course, we've already covered students need to feel like teachers like them. And of course, the opposite goes for the same, but students know who cares and who doesn't, and they act accordingly. Building those relationships is key. And if you want students to be engaged, you want them to be motivated, then take that time to get to know them, who they are, as I always say, individually, culturally, historically, so that you understand what their needs are in that math classroom. And then that goes right into how representation matters. And again, students realizing that a mathematician doesn't just look one way, doesn't just sound one way. And when we are knowledgeable of all of the mathematic contributions and mathematical and even scientific, can't think of the word right now. Oh my goodness. The word that says inventions. I can't think of it. Anyway, innovations and innovations. And they can see that, again, it's not just great white men who can be mathematicians. They can see that it's women, that it's people with disabilities, it's people who don't speak English. Like, it's all types of people who make mathematical contributions, and that you are already doing math in your own house with your families. Then that light bulb goes off and they're invested. Because it's more than, like we said, just getting the right answer and taking an assessment, right? Or doing an algorithm. It's actually applies to me. So those would be my two best things, is build those relationships and make sure you are showing diverse representation in that math classroom.
To build on that, and coming from the pre-service teacher standpoint, meet the kids where they are. Like she was saying, it's important that they know that you're there, you're building relationships, but meet them where they are. Don't expect them to be somewhere. You just have to take them where they come from. And that was really hard for me. That stayed really hard for me. And it's hard for a lot of teachers, especially experienced ones. They just want them to walk in and be ready. And that's just not the world we live in anymore. And so I would say meet them where they are. And then for fostering it specifically in the math classroom, show them that you can make a mistake too. Sometimes in the beginning, if you're teaching a smaller grade, especially, it's easy for us to do addition. 1 + 1 is 2. That is not for them. Make a silly mistake. Let them feel like they're winning at this. Give them something. Put a star on a spot that they only got one question right. It's very much, I need them to be encouraged. And I think that everyone should remember that encouragement is probably the best way to teach any of those kids.
Ladies, as I said, this has been absolute joy listening to you. I know that our listeners are really feeling just warm fuzzies at this point. I hope that people are taking notes about all of the ways that we really can see the wonder, joy, and beauty of mathematics by inviting more people to that space. So thank you so much for sharing. I invite our listeners to also pick up the article to make sure that you're reading the article in MTLT as well. And thank you for joining us for another wonderful episode of Adding It All Up. And Dewey and I will be back with you next month for another great episode. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Adding It All Up. At NCTM, we strive to bring you the biggest topics happening in mathematics. Join us next month for another exciting discussion.